Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Mr. Cupcake, and today we're going to be talking about a reaction video that Metatron did and asking the question, was Metatron wrong? No, I don't think he was. That is a total clickbait title, but hey, I do have a couple things I would like to point out, and he had kind of said in his reaction that he might do some more follow-on helmet videos, and I'll maybe toss about that for consideration. But first, why do I care? Well, I'm the developer of Blood and Crowns, a late medieval skirmish game from Firelock Games. So I have a vested interest in any discussion around medieval topics. I've also learned quite a bit from Metatron and as well as Matt from over at History Hit. And so, yeah, I want to kind of keep the conversation going. So this is my first video doing any of this type of content. So I would kind of like to start by saying like who I am and a little bit what my background is. I am not a historian. I'm not a medieval reenactor. I am obviously a medieval enthusiast and a fan of history. So I've been kind of reading up on history for quite some time. I did spend quite a bit of time as a living historian for the American Civil War reenacting here in the U.S., where I did everything from a private level in the ranks all the way up to battalion adjutant, helping to maneuver battalion-sized elements. So I do have some experience in that kind of simulated combat type situation. I was also a National Guardsman, and I spent some time in the military doing all kinds of exercises and drills and that kind of stuff. So I do have some experience doing that, and also in that capacity wearing various forms of, military gear as well as protective equipment. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm showing you night vision goggles. More on that in a minute. But let's go ahead and dive into a couple things that I observed about the video that, again, like I said, I want to see if we'll add to the conversation a little bit. The first thing that struck me as a bit odd is that there was the helmets were rated not as a unit, but as like kind of a component of the head protection. Now, I know that doesn't make as snappy of a title, the rating helmet protection, but I would kind of like to have seen a little bit of bait and switch there where, the video is titled, hey, we're going to rate helmets, but as you get into it, you really talk about the protective system around the head. So, for example, Metatron mentions this several times in his reaction about, having the Aventail or the Coif or whatever is happening to support that helmet in combat. I think it matters quite a bit. And I kind of really, the best thing I can equate it to is if you did like a reaction or a rating video of swords, but only considered the blade. So I would love to see it as more of a system, like I said, instead of just the helmet on its own. The second thing is I really appreciated how Matt established the context of how he was going to rate the helmets. We're getting a little pedantic, and if you're a fan of Metatron, you're okay with a little bit of that. So I would like to have seen more details about what type of situation you would be walking into with the helmet, what role in your battlefield, how much experience you have, whether you're mounted or dismounted, what weapon are you employing, as well as like what can you kind of know what the enemy capabilities are that you're going to be facing. And sometimes when some of these battles would set up hours ahead of time, you could probably get a general feel for what opponent you're facing and maybe adjust your kit accordingly. Specifically with the experience, I think if you look at that, I'm kind of assuming that Matt was talking about like maybe himself just walking on the battlefield with little to no experience in that kind of situation. And it might explain some of the way he kind of categorized his favorites to his least favorite helmets. Because if you notice, he kind of pushes some of the more protective helmets down at the bottom, but they're also ones that he mentioned that would have been very claustrophobic, maybe he would be breathing, affect his visibility, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that makes sense because, like I pointed out earlier with NVGs, if you've never worn night vision goggles and you suddenly put them on, they're incredibly disorienting. So if you don't have experience with certain equipment, it can actually be a detractor on your battlefield capabilities. So I think if he kind of was able to kind of caveat that, I'll bet you he would caveat it as that he was like, no, I'm talking about like me, I just boom, transported to a battlefield, slap on a helmet, and got to go into combat, and would explain why the barbute's at the top. The second thing that kind of struck me as odd is the categories in which he rated. Now, obviously Metatron gets a pass in this, he was just following on with Matt, but let me explain a little further. The first one I think is obvious and makes sense. Protection is going to be number one priority. The second one, it strikes me as a little bit of maybe a civilian type consideration because when you're on the battlefield, yeah, your comfort's not really that important. It's also incredibly relative. So, for example, if one of the most uncomfortable pieces of equipment protective equipment I ever wore is the mock gear, your protection from chemical attack or something like that. It is incredibly uncomfortable, but I am pretty confident it would feel like a warm hug from my mom if I was surrounded by deadly sarin gas. So it's kind of a relative term when you're talking about life and death situations. So instead, I would love, and this is the best term I could come up for this, I would love for the discussion to be more about the ergonomics. What is the helmet doing to allow you to interact with your battle space? I mean, after all, wars work, so ergonomics kind of sort of works as a term, but how is it affecting your capabilities, what you can do, how you're interacting with the battlefield, the people around you, your weapon, all of that interaction. And that does tie into safety, when they both mention the breathing, very important. Being able to lift the visors if you have that opportunity to breathe better, heat, all those things, all those factors that allow to either increase or depreciate your battlefield capabilities. The second thing is visibility. I think it's too narrow of a topic or too narrow of a category. And it's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but like both of Metatron and Matt were talking, they got a lot of discussion around peripheral vision. The one thing you have to kind of keep in mind with that is when you're in a high tense situation and your adrenaline's pumping, you actually get tunnel vision. Your peripheral vision, your vision starts to naturally become more tunneled anyway. So your peripheral vision isn't quite as important, maybe, or it starts to be affected pretty tremendously anyway. I would much rather have seen them say, to call this category situational awareness and talk more about what is the helmet doing to help you establish and maintain your situational awareness. Because when you're in a battle, you're working with other people. So if you're assuming everybody to your left and your right are friendly, then your peripheral vision isn't quite as important. You just kind of more care about whether they're there or not. Sometimes you can get that through feel by touching, those sorts of things. The other thing that's important is hearing. And I didn't hear a lot of discussion around that. And I'd like to hear more about that. And also speaking. So those things are very important, especially in the din of battle when things start getting hectic. Being able to lift the visor and speak to people around you, being able to hear what they're saying to you. And that kind of goes back to what I said earlier about knowing more about what kind of role the person's playing. Because if you're a part of, say, like a pike formation where you really need to work together, communication is going to be a lot more important. If you're in a cavalry charge and you're roaring down, maybe it's not as important. I don't know. I want to hear more about what Matt and Metatron both have to say about this. But yeah, being able to look at, and then also the articulation. I think Metatron mentioned this in his reaction. He talks about tilting his head, and when he mentioned Jason Kingsley, when you get the frog mouth out. If you look, the frog mouth has a kind of almost comes down on the chest. The same thing with the Bevois. It's going to mess with your articulation, I would imagine, quite a bit, as far as being able to look around you and maintain, like I said, establish and maintain that situational awareness to know what's going on that side of the line, what's going on this side of the line. Also being able to hear commands. How is you going to be hear trumpet calls, people talking to you, all those sorts of things. So again, I would probably want to shift that last category into maybe situational awareness instead. So anyway, that's kind of it. But so fast feedback. Metatron, if you get to see this, thank you for your content. I really appreciate it. Matt, if you happen to watch this, thank you for your content. Appreciate everything you're adding to the space and all your, it's been great and very helpful for me as I develop Blood and Crowns. And until next time, game well. Game very well. Hey, real quick, while I was putting this video together, Metatron did release a helmet video. Go check that out. Link will be in the description. So we'll see. But he did say he's going to part of a series. So hopefully he'll get to see this and it'll still help. So, okay, go check that out. Carry on.